Hey everybody, welcome to Systems Expert. Let's dive into the question.
Hi Clement. So today I want you to design the Facebook newsfeed.
The Facebook newsfeed. Okay. So the Facebook newsfeed seems like it's a pretty large feature that has a lot of sub features or smaller components to it. Like for instance, you can obviously load and view a user's newsfeed. You can interact with a user's newsfeed by, liking status updates or posting status updates. You can also refresh a news feed with new posts like in real time. So I guess my question is, what part of the Facebook news feed are we designing exactly?
So just focus on the core functionality of the feed. So posting a status, getting your newsfeed, and updating your newsfeed with new posts. Don't worry too much about what goes into a post or the API for that matter. I just want you to design the feed creation and refreshing. So how and when it gets constructed and updated with new posts from your friends.
Okay. But so to clarify, posts can be pretty complicated, right? They can have pictures or videos, special types of status updates. Are we not handling that? Do we not care about, for instance, like how we would store, a bunch of videos or that kind of stuff?
That's correct. Yeah, we don't really care about this for the purpose of this interview. We can treat posts as opaque entities that we'll certainly want to store, but without worrying about the details of storage, the ramifications for large files like images and videos, and so on.
Okay. So I guess what I'll write down is we're really caring about uh, loading a news feed, loading and updating a news feed, right? Because you said updating with new posts. So loading and updating, and I'll write it NF for news feed. And we care about posting, but this is more about like posting as it relates to updating a news feed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I'll just put kind of like an arrow here, which is we really care about the ramifications of posting on a user's news feed.
Mm-hmm.
But then, are we going to want to deal with the system or the service that actually generates news feeds? Because as far as I know, it's quite complicated to create a news feed. You want to actually like rank the most relevant posts. Do we care about that or?
So no, you're not designing the ranking system or the ranking algorithm. You can just assume you have access to that, and you can simply feed it a list of relevant posts, and it generates the newsfeed for you to display.
Okay. So that simplifies our system a little bit, or at least allows us to focus on other areas of the system.
Yeah.
Are we concerned with showing ads to users? Because I guess ads is also similar to ranking, where you probably need some sort of entirely different service handling that and figuring out what ads are most important for a user. So is that something that we don't want to worry about either?
So think of that as maybe like a bonus part of the design. If you can find a way to fit it in or figure out where it might fit, then that's great. But don't focus on that at the start, at least.
Okay, so I'll just write like no ranking, or I'm it's understood that it's just taken for granted. No ranking and no ads. As far as scale, I know that Facebook is a huge platform, but how big of an audience are we serving here? And is our audience global or?
So yes, obviously we have a global audience like Facebook does in the system. And let's kind of round the numbers out. So we have 1 billion users, sorry, with 10 million new status updates posted every day.
Okay, so we have a billion different users.
Yeah.
We have 10 million status updates every day, you said?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll put 1 billion users. This is per day, or is this?
Yes, you can assume that there's
Okay.
going to be per day 1 billion users on the platform.
1 billion users per day on the platform. Um, 10 million posts per day. And so I guess, is it fair to assume that, we would have something like 10 billion news feeds loaded per day if on average a user loads it 10 times, or maybe 5 billion per day?
Yeah, let's actually take that as a good measure. Yeah.
Okay. So 10 million posts per day. I'll add the per day here. And we said, this is like 5 billion newsfeed loads per day. Okay, so we're really dealing with gigantic scale here. One other number that I think would be really relevant would be the number of friends that every user has, at least on average, because I'm thinking it looks like one of the major parts of the system that we're designing is the effect of posting a status update and having that post update the news feeds of other users. And who are those other users? They're the friends of the person posting. So how many friends can we assume on average a single user has?
Let's go with a nice number like 500 for the purposes of the interview. But as you can imagine, right, some users are going to have way more friends, some are going to have way fewer. So yeah, but 500 is the average.
Is it fair to say that like it would be kind of a bell-shaped distribution for as far as like friends goes? Like some people have like a lot of friends, but some have none. But on average, it's if the majority of people have 500.
Yeah, let's say that. Yep.
Okay. So I guess the average is really what's going to be the most important, but I'll just draw this to indicate that this might be bell-shaped, because I feel like those few people who have a lot of friends might actually be problematic. So we might have to handle them in the system.
Yeah.
But we'll see a little bit later. I guess the next question would be, when we do post a new status update and we want to update news feeds, how fast do we want this update to happen? And what really worries me is the fact that we're dealing with a global audience. So we might have people who are our friends who would have to see the new post, but who might be, halfway across the world from us. Are we okay with maybe having, location-based discrepancies in terms of latency for news feeds to reflect a new post?
Yeah. So, for instance, if you post something, then one of your friends who are close to you, so within the same region, should see the post within a few seconds. But I think we're okay if a friend you have like in Europe, for example, sees the post much later, say within a minute.
Okay, so I guess I'll put where our latency for seeing a new post is going to be somewhere between 1 second to 1 minute, depending on how far away people are. But this is going to be, I guess, our ballpark estimate. Is that accurate?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, and I guess the last question that I think I have would be regarding availability. What kind of availability are we aiming for the system?
So your design shouldn't be relying on every machine being always up. It shouldn't go completely unavailable or fail from a single machine failure, but it's not a high availability HA requirement. But however, the posts shouldn't ever just disappear. So once the user client gets a confirmation that the post was created, you can't lose that post.
I see. Okay, so that makes sense. Basically, we want, like, posts have to be, maybe I'll write this in red. Posts have to be persistent.
Yep.
And I guess we're going to have to store them in persistent storage is what that's telling me. Posts should be persistent, but we don't necessarily care about high availability. We still want good availability, as we can imagine, for such a system. Okay, so I'll just put down the persistent and no HA, no high availability. Okay, so I think I have most of the information that I need to start tackling this design. I feel like this design is really going to be divided into two major subsections. There's the entire flow that starts at a user posting a status update. And then there's the entire flow that starts at a user loading their news feed, the first time during the day, for example, or any time during the day for that matter. But then these two core user actions are very much related. Like, basically, if I give myself some space here, I'll go to the very bottom of my canvas. You can imagine that we have two actions. We have create post. So create post. And you said we don't really care about the API like method signatures for these APIs here.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I won't go into that then. This is just the API call that a user or a client would call if they're posting a status update. Create post.
Yep.
But then you also have somewhere here, the other main function, which is get newsfeed, and I'll write this as get feed maybe. So these are the two core user actions, and then where do we go from here? Well, like I said before, there's going to be some kind of like bridge between these two things because we said that we want a feed, like here, let's say we have a feed, we want this feed to get updated with a new post. So there's going to be some sort of link between these two sort of parts of the system. I'll put this arrow up here. I'll get to it in a little bit. Like this will not, stay there. The point is just that these are related parts of the system or connected in some way.
Yep.
We're dealing with billions of users. We're dealing with a lot of users. So while I'm not exactly sure like how we're going to design this yet, what I do know is that whatever servers handle these API requests here, like the get feed and create post, we're going to have some heavy load balancing because with that kind of scale, it's just impossible to do without. But what I'm trying to figure out is like the kind of server selection strategy that we would have for our load balancing. I feel like that might give me an idea of where we want to go with this because when you're creating a post, right, you don't need any kind of caching or server stickiness. You're just creating a post. You're just adding data to the database. So I think that here, to start this part of the system off, we can have like some load balancing here or, a cluster of load balancers. And these could just reroute our create post requests to some API servers that would handle this API call or these API calls in a round robin type of fashion because like I just said, we don't need any type of caching or server stickiness. Does that kind of make sense for this part of the system?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll write load balancing, load balancing with round robin. RR is going to be round robin. And the idea is this goes to a bunch of API servers. I'll try to figure out how these API servers actually, handle these requests in a second. But what happens here with the get feed? So here we also need load balancing. I don't think that for feeds, though, we want round robin. Because if you're getting a feed, you're getting data that is stored somewhere. And I feel like if a single user might request their feed multiple times a day. So let me see. Let me table this for a second and try to figure out where our actual storage solution lives because I feel like that might be indicative as far as like what would happen here.
Okay.
So, when we create a post, we want to store our post somewhere. And here I think that having some form of relational database that stores all of our posts, maybe all of our users and everything would make sense. So I'm actually going to write in blue here, we'll have like a relational database. I'll put RDB. This is going to be our main database. Now the question is, clearly these API servers are eventually going to have to store a post in this relational database. Maybe I'll put like a tentative arrow here, but just for now, like I'm not sure if this is exactly, I'm not sure if they're exactly going to go directly to the database, but the idea is they will eventually have to store the post. But now the question is, would these feeds or would these clients issuing these get feed calls, would they go directly to the database to get the feeds? Clearly, like generating feeds is going to happen from the database at one point or another, but it feels like it would be a lot of querying the database if we were generating the feeds, from these API calls directly here. Also, like we said, like it would make sense to have some load balancing happen here. And I feel like you would want, for something where you're getting news feeds that are relevant to particular users, you would want or likely want to shard your database based on the users, or like based on the user ID, for instance. But I'm kind of scared of sharding this database here because we said that we would store our posts in here and maybe even our users and everything. And if we were to shard this database, then to generate a news feed, we would have to join, perform queries across all of our shards. So this seems kind of like a nightmare. So what I'm thinking is that we may want to treat a Facebook news feed as a kind of separate piece of data. In other words, we have our main relational database here that stores posts at the very least, and probably users as well. But news feeds would be stored separately. We could store news feeds in such a way that we shard whatever storage solution has the feeds. Okay, so that's sort of what I'm thinking. And actually, this might be good because we mentioned before that we're going to need some kind of ranking algorithm, which you said we might have for free out of the box. But that ranking algorithm is likely going to be the thing that actually should generate news feeds from this database. Okay, so I know I've been saying a lot. Let me see if this makes sense. The idea is this is our main database where we have, posts and users stored. Here we have a bunch of shards that store news feeds for particular users. So users are going to get, like, these API calls are going to get forwarded to relevant shards that store the news feeds for the users. So I guess I'll write here we have a load balancer that is, balancing with, it's hashing the user IDs, for example. Let's say that we track user IDs. So user ID hashing. And here we then have a bunch of shards, which I'll write, I guess I can write them in blue to show that they are storing news feeds. So we'll have them, like 1, 2, and we'd have a lot. We can probably estimate how many we have in a second. I'll put some dots here to show that we have a lot. But the idea is this load balancer then, goes to the various shards. These API calls go to the load balancer up here. And then we can have the ranking algorithm that lives in between these kind of shards that hold the news feeds and this relational database. And the ranking algorithm is going to be the thing, or the ranking algorithm service is going to be the thing that actually fetches a bunch of posts from the database, aggregates them, generates a news feed by applying the algorithm, and then sends the news feeds to these shards on a recurring basis. Maybe like every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every hour, depending on how fast we want news feeds to be updated, throughout the system or for the product. Does this strategy make sense before I continue drawing, or?
Yeah, and it makes sense, especially for another reason that you didn't mention, which is the fact that the feed will likely get paginated. So you're not going to return the entire feed to the user when they try to get the feed, but rather you'll send maybe the first 20 posts or items in the feed, and then they might request the next 20 items after a while. And so by storing the news feeds and having this sharding strategy, you'll be able to just serve it in. For example, if you're asked for the second page, the query for the second page will go to the same machine as the query for the first page. And so you'll just be able to serve what you already kind of computed.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because a given news feed might have actually like hundreds or thousands of posts. It just looks like it's a single page on Facebook, but it's actually multiple pages behind the scenes. Oh, right. I understand what you mean. Like this get feed API call basically is a paginated API call. Mm-hmm. We make a request that goes, let's say, to like this shard here, and this shard just returns maybe like the first page, which would be the first 10 or 20 posts. And then if we request the second page, we get forwarded again to this shard that already has the second page. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Okay, cool. So this makes sense. So then I think I'm going to go with this idea then. Let me just erase here these rectangles that overlap. And I guess here we can write, we can have our ranking service. So I'll put rank service.
Sure.
This would periodically go to this database and periodically go to all the shards. These are all feed shards. So I'll write them here. Feed shards. And they're all kind of like equivalent to each other. They just happen to store news feeds for different users or different groups of users. And here, do you want me to go into more detail as to how this ranking service works, or can I just assume that like this kind of works out of the box here?
Just assume this works. It's likely to be a cluster of machines with probably some really smart caching logic inside. But for the sake of the question, let's just assume it's kind of a black box that gives you what you want.
Okay, great. And by the way, here we were talking about ads earlier. You said it was a bonus. I think ads would probably live somewhere here. So like here we might have ads service. And this would also somehow talk to the feeds and inject ads in them. But let's not dive into it. That's okay, right? I can just skip this for now.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. I'll just put an arrow to show that this would talk to the feeds likely, and then talk to some database. Maybe there's a separate database for ads. As far as how many of these feed shards we have, I guess we probably need to estimate that because maybe the system does fall apart here. So we said that we have, how many users do we say? We have 1 billion users per day.
Yep.
10 million posts per day. I guess like the 10 million posts isn't necessarily relevant here. We're really just talking about the number of news feeds that we would have to store in these feed shards. The fact that there are 5 billion news feed loads per day, that's still fine because we probably store, all the different variations of a news feed here, or probably these feed shards get updated periodically, like we said, from the ranking service. So what really matters is the fact that we have 1 billion users that are going to be storing 1 billion news feeds in these shards, or that are going to have 1 billion news feeds stored in these shards. So let's see. If a news feed has 1,000 posts, if we're talking about that pagination and how, you can seemingly scroll forever on Facebook and never run out of posts, I think 1,000 posts per news feed is a good estimate. Do you agree here, or?
Yeah. 1,000 posts should be enough. And if they run out, we can just get some more from the database. As long as it doesn't happen too often, I think it's okay.
Okay, so let's go with 1,000 as our estimation. And then let's assume that a single post is, as an upper bound, maybe like 10 kilobytes. I want to go with 10 kilobytes just because we can store images and videos in posts. I know that you said that we don't have to worry about how we're going to handle that, but the point is a post can have a lot of data in it. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to give ourselves an upper bound of 10 kilobytes per post. If we have 1,000 posts of 10 kilobytes each in every news feed, in 1 billion news feeds, that's 1,000 times 10 kilobytes. That's 10 megabytes per news feed. So I'll maybe write this here. That's 10 KB per news feed.
I think you meant megabytes. 10 megabytes.
Oh, yes. 10 megabytes per news. 10 megabytes. 'Cause 10 KB multiplied by 1,000 posts. So yes, 10 megabytes. Then we have 1 billion users. So 1 billion news feeds. So 1 billion is 1,000 to the power of 3. So you multiply this by 1,000 3 times. So 10 gigabytes, 10 terabytes, 10 petabytes. So you have 10 petabytes worth of data. I guess, wait, we said 10 terabytes, then 10 petabytes, because 10 petabytes is 1,000 times 10 terabytes. I think we can have all of these machines, all of our shards can basically have 10 terabytes of storage. And I guess we would use disk here. We couldn't store this in memory. So we would store our news feeds in 1,000 shards or 1,000 machines carrying 10 terabytes each. And the news feeds would be stored on disk rather than in memory, which I think would be fine because like when we're requesting a news feed, the difference in latency between fetching something from memory, reading it from memory versus reading it from disk doesn't seem like it's the thing that's going to make or break our product for loading news feeds. So is that okay? Does that seem sensible?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, so I'll put 10, like this whole thing here is a total of 10, it's 1,000 machines or 1,000 shards that have 10 terabytes of storage each.
Yeah.
And I guess the more I think about it, we said that we're dealing with a global audience, right?
Yeah.
And we did say at the beginning that if you post, well, I guess we haven't yet tackled what happens when someone creates a post and we're supposed to update our news feeds. We'll get into that in a second. But we did say that we were okay with having some latency difference between local users versus users across the world. That's correct, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm thinking then is that this entire system that I'm drawing out here, this might be like a per region type of system. This might be like, a subsystem within a greater system. This is just for one region, and then we might have this exact same system in another region, and these two systems would kind of talk to each other to asynchronously update each other when there are new posts or things like that. And if we do go with that kind of approach, then this means that this is kind of an upper bound. Like we actually might not need 1,000 machines of 10 terabytes each because we might only be serving, if we have 10 regions, we might only be serving 1/10 of a billion users in this part of the system. Does that make sense? Like what I'm getting at?
Yep.
Okay, so I guess what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say that this is an upper bound. 1,000 shards of 10 terabytes each is an upper bound if we want to store the entire Facebook population in this part of the system, but it is an upper bound because we're going to have different regions, and I think the different regions will come into play a little bit later once we get into the updates that happen when you create a post.
Okay.
But I guess that is the next step now. It's what happens when you create a post and you need to update these feeds. Because I guess thinking of the Facebook news feed, when you're scrolling down the Facebook news feed, is the idea that if a user is scrolling down and one of their friends posts a status update, they should suddenly see that status update appear maybe like in their next page of newsfeed posts? Is that how it works?
Yeah, actually, that's it's not necessarily exactly how Facebook works, but it's really similar. So let's just assume that's the case. When a new post comes in that's relevant to the user, the next fetching of their feed or the next page might contain it. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Because I guess the other option would have been if your newsfeed like notifies the user that, hey, there's a new post, but that would be kind of similar. If that were the case, we probably would have some kind of like, shards would kind of push to clients, but you're saying that we don't have to worry about that for now. We can just assume that we're going to be getting new posts in the next page of a newsfeed.
Yeah. The logic would probably be somewhere. There would be a piece of logic inside the feed shards that wouldn't be super complicated because they need to get updated when there's a new post anyway. So it's just about kind of routing that back to the user somehow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just go then with the thing that it just gets injected into the next page of the newsfeed that a client requests.
Yeah, let's do that.
And I guess then, just to make it clear, here when we have our clients issuing get feed calls, to really make it clear, it's like get feed page 1. I'm writing pseudocode here, but get feed get page 1, and then the shard returns, the first page of the feed, and it tells the client what the next page is. So that when the client is kind of scrolling down, it issues another request to get page number 2, page number 3, and so on and so forth. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so now we go back to this idea of what happens when we create a post and we need to update our feeds following the feature that we just described. Well, we said that our API servers here, maybe I should write that these are API servers. API servers. These API servers clearly have to store the post in our relational database. And then this post is going to be kind of grabbed by the ranking service the next time that it generates a news feed. But we said that we need posts to appear in a feed in the order of seconds, right? But anywhere between a second and a minute, depending on the region of the user. So if our ranking service here aggregates posts and generates new feeds every 5, 10, 60 minutes, that's not going to be enough. So we're going to need a second thing. Like these API servers need to somehow, apart from writing the post in the database, they need to somehow notify the feed shards that there's a new post and that they need to grab that new post and add it to their news feeds. So I think that this is where this bridge might come into play. So let me actually erase that.
Yeah, that's the part, like the core part that's missing right now is the connection between the left and the right.
Okay, yeah. And I'm thinking that it might make sense to use a pub/sub system here because we need all of the posts that are created here to appear in these feeds. But we have 1,000 different feeds, right? We have 1,000 different feeds that need to be notified essentially in real time of a new post. So having, multiple like pub/sub topics up here act as the bridge between these two parts of the system, and having these feeds, or not these feeds, but these feed shards basically subscribe to the pub/sub topics seems like a sensible strategy. And I guess the idea would be the pub/sub topics, we would have a one-to-one mapping between pub/sub topics and feed shards. There would be as many pub/sub topics as there are feed shards. The pub/sub topics would only carry posts for particular users. We would use the same hashing strategy that we use down here. And I think that would tie our two systems together very well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, so then I think we'll have pub/sub topics here. We'll have one pub/sub topic, a second pub/sub topic. We'll have a bunch of them. And these topics, they're going to take in messages that hold the post that needs to be sent to a particular user's feed. These feed shards are going to subscribe to these topics. So here, this feed shard kind of subscribes to the top topic maybe. And as new posts come in, the new posts get basically, fed into the shards. And here, these API servers have to do this secondary action after they've stored the post here of sending a post to a topic, but they have to send it. This is where the hashing comes into play. They have to send it based on a hash of the user ID, but these user IDs they're the friends of the person creating the post. So we actually need to get all of the user's friends, get their user IDs, based on those user IDs, forward the post to the topics, and that's how they get routed to the correct feeds. So here, this arrow here, I guess I'll undo it. It kind of first has to go to the relational database, because the idea is probably the relational database stores, like user IDs or user rows, and every user, we could probably assume, has a column of its friends, or the user IDs of all its friends. And from there, we grab those user IDs, and then we do the hashing. So that would be the idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
My only problem here is, what if we have, like, this is where we said we have 500 friends on average per user. That seems okay to send, 500 pub sub messages. But what if we have those users that have a lot more friends, like the power users, so to speak? Maybe we don't need, like, past a certain number of friends, we don't need to have all of those friends receive updates in their newsfeed immediately. And I'm assuming that maybe like friends in the database, or rather users in the database, might have some kind of last online column, or maybe we have some other way of knowing when a user was last online, and we can basically, notify only the most active users or the most recently active users that they have a new post that should be thrown to their feed. Does that kind of make sense, to limit the number of notifications that we need to send at once?
Yeah. We definitely don't want to be generating too much traffic. If someone has like 10,000 friends, we don't want to be sending too much traffic over the internal network.
Especially, but I guess like it would be fine because there are many people who just aren't online on Facebook every day. So if we have some way of filtering those people out, and also I suppose here we said that we're dealing, like, this entire system that I'm designing here is only for one region. Like I mentioned, we will probably have a duplicate version of this system for another region. So we can actually also filter by user region here and only send this new post, like in this part of the system, only to the users in that region or the friends in that region.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
So that would be that. And then once we have like all this information from the database here, we can basically route to the appropriate topic based on user ID hashing. Now, there is one problem that I'm thinking about. It's that user ID hashing. Let me write hashing here. The one problem that I'm thinking about, though, is that these API servers here are performing a lot of actions, like critical actions. They need to store the post in the relational database. This is because we said posts have to be persistent.
Yeah.
But they also need to update the news feeds. So we run into this problem of, what if something goes wrong here? And like maybe we don't even store the post in the database. That's not good. We don't want that to happen. But what if we do store the post, but we don't notify people of their feeds, that their feeds need to be updated? That's not super great. What if we do the opposite, where we only update the feeds, but we fail to store the post? So I feel like we need some kind of better system here. I don't think these API servers should be the ones handling all of these actions. And also, I guess I'm forgetting one thing. Since this is a region system, a regional-based system, and we said that we do need to notify people in other regions. It just so happens that we can have longer latencies. These API servers need to do another thing. They need to notify the other regions that something needs to happen, that a post just came in and users need to be updated. So like there's some third action here that needs to happen that goes to another region, and we can talk about that in a second. But the point is, these API servers right now are doing too much, I think.
Yeah.
With not enough like security, or not security, but safety rather. So I think we have to have some solution here. I'm wondering if we can just go with a messaging system again, a la PubSub, where we might not need like a bunch of different topics, per user ID or for clusters of user ID based on hashes. Maybe we only need one PubSub topic with multiple partitions if we're using Kafka or something. But the point is, I think we need that message queue that gives us that guaranteed at least once delivery. Like the idea is these API servers, once they get a create post call, they notify some PubSub topic that says, hey, I just got a post. You have to do 3 things now, or rather the subscribers to that topic, you have to do 3 things now. You have to store the post in the database. You have to forward the post to all of the friends here following the logic that we said before, and you have to notify the other regions. And if we have these messages in a PubSub topic, we have that at least once delivery guarantee. Does that make sense? Like, do you think having another PubSub messaging system here is sensible?
Yeah, I actually think it's really nice, especially since you might have some logic for detecting, for example, bots trying to create posts, and you might have some pre-processing of the post itself before you want to store it in the database. And things like this don't necessarily need to happen on the API servers, so I think it makes sense to have it happen asynchronously after as a consumer of some PubSub topic.
Okay, great. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about the fact that we might want to do post processing or even like, feeding posts into some data pipeline or, some machine learning model or algorithm. So this makes a lot of sense. So that means I'm going to actually just erase these arrows here. And this frees up our API servers to do what they do best, which is just to take a request, handle it by sending it to a PubSub topic, for instance, and then just going back to handling requests. They don't need to do other stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll erase all of these arrows. The idea here would then be we have our PubSub system. I guess I'll just write one PubSub topic here. Depending on what technology we're using, we might have multiple partitions in the PubSub topic, or we might use multiple PubSub topics without partitions because they happen under the hood if you're using something like Google Cloud PubSub. The point is we have a messaging system here, and all of these API servers are, forwarding the requests to the PubSub system. And then here we need subscribers of the PubSub topic. So I'll write them maybe in white here. These are going to be subscribers to the PubSub system.
Okay.
Subscribers. I suppose here we can just write topic just to make that overwhelmingly clear. And these subscribers are going to be the ones who actually do all of the logic of going to the database, going to all of the topics here. And the idea is these arrows kind of start from the subscribers, right? The subscribers go here, get all of the friends, then they go up here, and then they notify the other region. So, and we can talk about that in a second. I'll just put an arrow here to the other region. And I guess, this kind of goes to the subscribers who are watching the topic. I think this is most of what needs to happen in this regional system. Let's talk actually about this other region thing that I just mentioned that I said we still have to talk about because it's not like super trivial. So let me give myself some space. Let's assume that we're like our system, like I'll draw an arrow that comes kind of from the side that's kind of saying like, hey, our subscriber is contacting the other region or is contacting some part of the system that's going to contact the other region. And here we have like a big circle that's the other region. This is a duplicate version of our entire system here for the other region. So I'll put other region. And I suppose there would be multiple other regions. How would we want this to happen? Basically, what we want is we want these subscribers to notify the other region that they should act as if they are at this part of the system. Like, we have gotten a create post. We don't need to deal with this PubSub topic section here. We just need to store the post in our regional database, to forward the post to our regional topics here based on user ID hashing of the friends. And then, everything else works the same in those respective regions. So to do that, it's basically like notify the other region that they need to start here and probably have some kind of logic, extra logic that tells the other regions, you don't need to replicate this to other regions. Like you don't need to do this step of this part of the system. You don't need to notify other regions. I'm handling it. I'm the region from which this post originated. I will handle notifying all the other regions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like that way we don't have a cascading of other region notifications.
You mean that way the create post message doesn't get infinitely replicated to other regions or forwarded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And every region handles its own contacting of other regions based on posts in its own region, like posts that have been created from its own region. But The only thing that I'm thinking is that we probably want to use PubSub again here. We probably want to use another messaging service to guarantee that we end up contacting the other region, because we need that guaranteed delivery. So I actually think that here we can just have another, pub sub system, and we probably have, like, let me actually give myself some space here. Let me grab this other region and move it. We probably have some kind of like forwarding service.
Yeah.
Like, this is a forward service, and this subscribes to the PubSub messaging system, receives the notification that it needs to tell the region that we just got to post in another region. Let's start the entire machinery that needs to happen, and there you go. Like, here you get to the subscribers at this point. Those subscribers who were over here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess the last thing that I need to mention, I think, is the fact that since we're using PubSub, like, the entire reason that we want to use PubSub is so that if one of these things fails here, like, imagine we fail to store in the database, or we fail to contact the other region, we will be able to redo it. Like, the message will still be stored. It won't have been completed, and we can go back and get it and redo these things. But this only works if all of these operations are idempotent, like if we don't care about performing them multiple times. And I think they are, right? Because let's say we repeat the operation of storing a post in the database, we can just overwrite the post,
Yeah.
right? Because every post has like a unique ID that probably gets generated, at this level or something, or rather, at this level. And then for this here, we would send a duplicate post if this has already been done. Like, if these arrows have already been done, but then the feed shards can actually handle that. Like, if they see that they're getting a post that they've already injected in their feed, they can have some logic that says, like, hey, I can just dismiss this, right?
Yeah.
And then same for the notification to the other regions. I think the other regions can store, like, posts that they've just handled or something like that, and they know not to re-replicate it. Or the other regions, you just go back to them and, like, they've already performed all of this, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the PubSub system gives us the replayability of messages, which is really nice. And then the deduplication can happen either at the PubSub layer in the other PubSub topics, or the feed shard layer as well.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so then I think I'm pretty comfortable then with relying so heavily on PubSub here and with this system as a whole.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good design. Thanks a lot, Clement.
Cool. Thank you. With that, I hope that you found this video informative, and we'll see you in the next one.